Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield audio podcast.
I want to do something in this podcast that I have never done before. I want to ask you to get politically active with me about a cause. I won't do this much. I often speak about causes. I often urge you to be politically active and to make a difference in your community. But today, in a sense, I want to ask you to help me help the Kurds. Now, I want to say right up from the top that I don't think I'm the great crusader or champion of the Kurds. I love them. I speak for them. I meet with congressmen and senators about them. I've written a book about them. I will help them as much as I can because I think theirs is a noble cause. But please don't think that I think I'm some kind of, Nelson Mandela of the Kurds. They're going to produce their own Nelson Mandelas. They're going to produce their own Churchills. I'm just privileged to try to help my American fellow citizens know something about them. Let me explain to you what is going on with the Kurds right now regarding American policy, and then I'm going to tell you about how you can make a difference and join me and many, many others, and certainly people who are making far more of a difference than I am, in helping to serve our Kurdish friends. You all know that the Kurds are in regions like the north of Iraq, the south and the southeast of Turkey, in Iran, in Syria. You're hearing about this all the time. And they have become the primary boots on the ground against ISIS. In Iraq primarily, but also in those other countries I've just named, mainly Syria. The Kurds are the primary boots on the ground, the primary forces on the ground. You hear our president say, for example, I don't want to have to put American boots on the ground. Well, he probably won't have to very much because the Kurds are there doing the job. In Iraq, in Iraqi Kurdistan, there is a special challenge that is causing grief. Here's ISIS, this system of global evil. We've even had beheadings in Oklahoma and shootings of guards in Canada that were ISIS-inspired. I believe we're going to have more of that in this year. I'm sorry to say. We're going to have more of, the church in small-town Texas interrupted by ISIS-inspired nutcases who go in shooting things up. I'm not giving people ideas. This is actually what's already on the ISIS websites that's intended for U.S. youth consumption. And so what we have then is in Iraqi Kurdistan, you have the Kurds, and you've certainly heard me talk about the marvelous society that they have been building. And if you've read my book, you know that I'm a real advocate for them and really believe that they've built something magnificent there in northern Iraq. The problem is not them. The problem is American foreign policy. American foreign policy, as a matter of law, requires that aid to the Kurds goes through Baghdad, because in Iraqi Kurdistan, of course, those Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan and the Kurdish regional area, of course, are part of Iraq. So U.S. law requires that whatever aid we give, tanks, weapons, food, medicine, aid, whatever we do, has to be essentially flow through Baghdad, meaning that Baghdad has to give approval. The goods might literally physically have to flow through Baghdad. And the problem has been, of course, that Baghdad and the Kurdish regional government in the north are often in tension. The government in Baghdad is very corrupt. It's like trying to pass your children's inheritance through the Sopranos, in terms of who wants a taste and who wants a piece and who wants their percentage and who wants their cut. And the word they use in the Middle East is bakshish, who wants the dollar bills under the table, so to speak. And so the problem has been that there are the Kurds, and they are nobly fighting against ISIS. They have won tremendous victories. In fact, just this week, victory has been declared in Kobani, which is the border town between Syria and Turkey that has been in such contention. The Kurds have finally won. They have defeated ISIS. It's wonderful. It's exciting. And yet still, the U.S. does not support the Kurds directly. Well, it really has been an issue. And American law has been the primary issue because, of course, we should be supporting the Kurds directly and telling Baghdad to clean up their own house and to understand that we're going to do whatever we can to support the cause against ISIS on the ground. On September 18, 2014, of course, that was last year, Secretary of State John Kerry testified before the House Committee on Foreign Relations, and he said, "We have to send aid to the government in Baghdad because that's U.S. law. If you want to change it, fix it. We invite you to do so." In other words, he felt that he was his hands were being tied to some extent because the members of the House Foreign Relations Committee were saying, why aren't we arming the Kurds directly? And he said very accurately that the administration was following the law, even though they did it on a lot of things. They were following the law, and if Congress wanted to change it, they should do so. Well, one of the members of the House Foreign Relations Committee, in fact, the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, is a man named Ed Royce. I really respect him. And he has introduced a bill to allow, to make it legal, and in fact to call for, mandate, that the U.S. government is able to supply the Kurdistan Regional Government, which is the name for the government, KRG, Kurdistan Regional Government, there in Iraqi Kurdistan. This is called House Resolution H.R. 5747. I want you to know that name, H.R. 5747. Congressman Ed Royce from California, Republican, has proposed this bill, and what it would do, it is legislation that calls for providing arms directly to the Kurdistan Regional Government. It is very necessary. It is essential. It makes, and I'm quoting now, the policy of the United States to provide direct assistance to the Kurdistan Regional Government to combat ISIS. It identifies Iraqi Kurds as reliable and stable partners of the United States. It recognizes that the Peshmerga, that's the name for the Kurdish military, are the official security force of the Kurdistan Regional Government, organized in accordance with the Iraqi Constitution. It finds that defeating ISIS is critical to maintaining an inclusive, unified Iraq, and it emphasizes that ISIS is a significant terrorist threat which may employ more than 4,000 captured heavy weapons, 1,500 armored vehicles, and 50 long-range artillery pieces, most of which were made in the United States and abandoned in the field by the Iraqi army. That last commentary was me. That's not in the bill. So Congressman Royce's H.R. 5747, again, he's the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, his proposed bill, would change the tone, change the legal restrictions under which the U.S. government must operate in taking care of the Kurds. In other words, they have to pass all aid through the very corrupt, very ineffective government in Baghdad rather than work with the Kurds directly. Congressman Royce's bill would allow the U.S. government, in fact, it would insist that the U.S. government supply and arm the Kurds directly in the fight against ISIS. And I want to tell you, this is becoming one of the most important fights of our generation. And it's not just in Iraq, but that is where much of the fighting is now. And the Kurds, of course, this aid to the Kurds could very well destroy ISIS if we would get serious. Now, why have I gone through all of this detail? I know my eyes glaze over when I hear sometimes these political and legal recitations and House resolution this and what the committee did to that and then what the other committee had to do. But this is pretty simple. What I want you to do, in addition to just reading my book and getting the word out as much as you can with whatever reach and platform you have about the Kurds, who they are in America, the fact that there is a democratic, pro-Israel, pro-Western, pro-American people in the belly of the Middle East who want to be our friends and want to stand with us in the fight against terror. The fact that there is a people called the Kurds who ought to be our other ally along with Israel in the Middle East. And when we have chosen our friends so horribly, what I want you to do is get that word out, but I also want you to do something that many of you don't like to do, and that is contact your congressman. If you don't know who your congressman is, if you don't know their phone number, if you don't know their address, go on to congress.gov. It just couldn't be easier. Go on to the website congress.gov, and on the very front page, the very home page, you'll see a little slider that says basically find your representative. And you can go through there by name and bring up your representative. If you don't know who that is, there's a way you can even find it by your own address to know who your congressman and senator would be. You'll see their phone number. You'll see their address. I want you to advocate for the Kurds. Call their office. You won't get through to the person probably, but call their office and say you're calling to urge the congressman to support Congressman Royce's bill. You're urging them to support the Kurds in whatever way they can. And then I hope that you'll offer to send them one of my books. Now, let me say something about this. I know that this can sound like one big campaign for Stephen Mansfield to sell a lot of books, and I've just wrapped it in politics. Trust me, I only make a few dollars per book, and I'm spending a lot more money on this campaign for the Kurds than I'm certainly going to make. I don't want you to think this is a profit-making venture for me. It's not. Yes, if you buy a book, even at a deep discount, I probably am getting a little percentage of that. Trust me, that money's going into advocating for my friends, the Kurds. I'm not going to get rich on you buying, 5 books to send to your congressional delegation in D.C. But I want you to be part of this. This is one of the important fights in our generation. The Kurds have been horribly misunderstood. We Americans know a lot about our own history, but we don't know hardly anything about the Middle East. And there in the belly of the Middle East, this troubled land that is exporting terror everywhere, are a people who want to be our allies. They want to fight with us. They want to defeat ISIS. They want to build a pro-Israel, pro-Western, pro-democracy, free, fairly libertarian society right there in the north of what is now Iraq. I think Iraq, as you know, I've said this many times, may subdivide and cease to be Iraq in our generation. But regardless, the Kurds need to have their own homeland in time, and that may come. Right now, it's a matter of simply telling Congress you need to stand with the Kurds. Military aid does not need to go through Baghdad. So what am I asking you to do? I'm asking you to somehow make contact with your congressman and your senator. You'll have 2 senators per state, and then you'll have a congressman for your area, your geographic area. Go on congress.gov, find out who they are, and politely say that you want your congressman to stand with the Kurds and that those who can to back H.R. 5747. And you want the same kind of action going in the Senate. And then buy them a book. I mean, you can get the book, I think, on Amazon right now for, $10, $12? What is there, like 50 cents going in my pocket? Trust me, that money will be spent on some of these campaigns for the Kurds. And or get them another book if you know of another better one. I mean, there's lots of books out there. It's not about Stephen Mansfield. What it's about is standing and getting Congress to overcome these absurd restrictions that have kept the U.S. government from standing with the Kurds directly. And I believe we're living in a very important moment. I believe the Kurds are fighting the good fight. We need to stand with them. I certainly understand that most Americans barely understand who the Kurds are. That's not necessarily their fault. It's just not the kind of history that we have emphasized. But I'm telling you, it's a time for a little bit of a wake-up call in this regard. We need to stand with Israel, and we need to stand with the Kurds in the Middle East. Thank you for putting up with this. My next podcast is going to be all about you and some things you can do to be more effective in your life. I like to keep that emphasis, but every so often, I will ask you to take some action, stand with us, and stand with those who are standing with the Kurds and with Israel. And by the way, you just won't believe how much the Kurds of the Kurdistan Regional Government love Israel and have trade deals with them and fly the Israeli flag. Imagine that in a 97% Muslim country or people there in the belly of the Middle East, they actually fly the Israeli flag in parts of Kurdistan. You can see a picture of that on my website or on Facebook at Mansfield Writes. Anyway, thanks for putting up with this. Thanks for listening. Act now. You'll be glad you did, and you have my eternal thanks.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author and popular speaker who coaches and advises leaders worldwide. To learn more about Stephen, log on to stephenmansfield.tv. The Stephen Mansfield podcast is produced by Isaac Darnell, who also wrote and performed the Rockin' Podcast theme song. This is a Chartwell Literary Group production. Chartwell is ingeniously led by Beverly Darnell Mansfield. As a result, all rights are reserved. For more information, contact us through stephenmansfield.tv.